You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition.
With NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking to our learning stuff and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com. And of course, I will answer as many as I can. Or you can go to our webpage at letstalktorah.net, letstalktorah.net, and we have the archives and the new shows and a place for comments and a place for questions and, of course, the all-important donate button. You can hit that donate button, and, of course, that will help the show grow and help us continue to do all the good work that we're doing here. And it's, of course, greatly appreciated. And if you need a shout-out, of course, there's a place for that as well. Today is February 29th. Happens every 4 years. All the advertisers, leap day, leap this, leap that, leap the other thing. And, you know, it's one day. We have a whole month. We have a whole month. We are now in the leap month. It's really an interesting question, right? There's two Adars, right? So which is the real one and which is the additional one? So the fact is, we have Purim in the second one. So it would lead you to believe that the first one is the additional one, and the second Adar is the main month because that's when Purim comes out. Now, there's really, or it could be there is no real Adar. They're just Adar 1 and Adar 2, and no main one and additional one. It's just two. I'm not sure, but we have a month. Now, of course, we've talked about it before. Mention it quickly. The Jewish calendar and the Arabic calendar are similar in that they go according to the moon. Right? They follow the lunar month. The lunar month is 29 and a half days and a couple of minutes and a couple of seconds. The difference is that in the Jewish calendar, we adjust for the seasons that the holidays come out seasonally. So the Sukkot holiday, right, will come out in the fall, right, at the end of the harvest. And the Passover holiday, coming up soon, will always come out in the spring. First of all, the verse says it has to come out in the spring. And again, the holidays are all based around, you don't call it around farming, but to a certain extent it is. They even have the names. It's the holiday of the harvesting and the holiday of the gathering. And so that Chag Osir, Chag Kotzer, Chag Bikurim. So it's definitely true. They're supposed to be seasonal. If you wouldn't readjust, you lose 11 days a year. So after 3 years, you lost a month, right? After 6 years, you lost 2 months. Well, after, 10 years, right, all of a sudden you're in a totally different season. So if it's important, the Jewish calendar is connected, that the lunar calendar should be connected to the solar calendar, that's the only way to do it. Okay, so this week's Torah portion is Kisisa. And at the beginning of the Torah portion, we talk about the Machzis HaShekel, the half coin. There was a tax, it was really a yearly tax, that everybody had to give this half coin. The shekel was a silver coin, and it was probably like the main coin, like, a dollar bill, and you had to give half to the Beis Hamikdash, to the temple, in general, to be used for sacrifices. If there was leftovers, they could use it if they need extra sacrifices, if they need to fix the walls, if they need to take care of things in Jerusalem. It was a community. It was really a national tax. I was talking to my accountant today, all kinds of taxing things, and federal and local and Social Security and who knows what. The Machzis HaShekel was a national tax, a very minuscule tax. After speaking to my accountant today, right? So. What could be worth already? $1, 50 cents? Its value was quite small. But everyone gave. Now, not everyone gave. It seems to be connected to people who served in the army. Now, perhaps that's because if you serve in the army, we want to keep an accounting, and we don't count by heads. We're going to talk about that today. We don't count by heads, so how do we keep track? So everybody gives their coin, count up all the coins, and we're good to go. I know now you press a computer and you put all the names down, and you see in your Excel sheet how many names are there. Yes, very good. But here, it was just a simple way of counting how large your army is. Because we're going to see we're not into counting. Counting is, for the most part, not a good thing. And all this we're going to talk about. I'm just trying to give us some of the background so we can get ready to talk about all this stuff. Happens to be that the first collection of this Machzah Shekel was the only silver collected in the building of the Mishkan of the Tabernacle. Right, you think about it, it's interesting, right? Moses puts out the call, we need donations, and bring in your stuff. We're building the tabernacle, and the wood, and the materials, and the leathers, and the gold, and the copper. No silver, because silver is money. And this collection was not a money collection. This was a stuff. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. This was a stuff collection. So no money. So the only silver coming in was from this collection. Most of it, like the large majority, if there's 603,000, and I think 50 people or men that are counted, so you have 300,000 whole coins. So you'll end up, without getting into the details, you'll end up with 100 silver sockets. As each socket is 3,000 coins, you'll end up with 100 coins. That's called it's a certain weight, called a kikar or whatever. And the change would be used for the hooks and some bands in a few places, but not for anything major. The sockets, in other words, we have the beams. The Mishkan is made of these tall wooden boards or beams that are connected on the outside by bars, and there were, I think they call them talons, but there was like little legs or bars sticking out of the bottom, and they would fit into the sockets, and the sockets would hold up the building. So the first Machzah Shekel was used for those sockets. Every collection afterwards will be to pay for the public sacrifices. In other words, there's a sheep in the morning and a sheep in the afternoon. That's called the Tamid. On the Sabbath, you have another 7 sheep and some other stuff. On the new moon, the Rosh Chodesh, and on the holidays. So all the running and the costs for the temple are officially covered by that small tax. And of all the taxes, that's like minuscule. It is interesting that King David actually made a mistake. And he counted the Jewish people not using coins. He actually created a census. And because he created that census, there was a plague. Because the verse by us says, if you count by heads, that leads to a plague. So now we got to sit back and think a little bit, what is the problem? The Torah makes a very big deal. We do not count individuals. Even if you ever go to synagogue and they have to make sure there's a quorum of men, they don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. Instead, they have different verses that they use, and each letter represents a number. The famous verse is right, and you're the Ha'ilam person, or believe it or not, the blessing for Hamotzi also happens to have 10 letters, 10 words in it. But we don't count individuals. So Ben Bechaya says, the reason we don't want to count individuals is because for the Jewish people, we are one. We are a whole. We are a unit. Once you count people, You've taken them out of the group and you've created individuals. The Torah doesn't want individuals. And interesting enough, it leads, once we get singled out, it leads to what's called ayin hara, the evil eye, and the evil eye from there leads to a plague. So as an example, when Elijah goes to the lady, she was called Isha Shunamis. So this Isha Shunamis built an additional room for Elijah because it seems he came by, he traveled in that city, and he stayed by them. And they had a table and a bed and a lamp. And when he saw the new room, he wanted to pay her back. So he sends a message, you've made this beautiful room for me. Do you need something? Maybe you want to speak to the king. Maybe you need to speak to a general. Like, he did me such a big favor, right? I owe you, right? So how can I help you? And she says back, fascinating. She says back, Besoich ami anoichi Yeshivas. I live amongst my people. Don't focus on me. I don't want anybody looking at me. I don't want anybody noticing me. I just want to be amongst the Jewish people. I don't need anything. I did it. I wanted to honor you. This concept of not sticking out, we really talk about all the time, right? The idea is not to be showy, not to be noticeable, not to hang humongous chandeliers in your dining room and open the front shade, right? Not to drive around in the fanciest cars, not to build the biggest mansions, right? The blessing, people find blessing when they're modest. I live in Detroit. Detroit is beautiful. I mean, it is beautiful, but one of the things is until now at least, people are not ostentatious, if that's how you pronounce it. They're not showy. They're in their dress, in their cars, in their houses. They know it's important. They know what they want to take care of. And it's true, we're not the richest community, so it's true. But people who need to be showy, besides the fact that it leads to many other issues, but people get jealous. And people get jealous, and then they look at you this way, they look at you that way, and it doesn't lead to good things. So this Isha Shunamis says, I'm amongst my nation. Now, Elijah's attendant says, his name was Gehazi, he says she has no children. Elijah's promised her a child. She has a child. A few years later, the child gets sick. The child dies. She goes to Elijah. Elijah has to come down and bring the child back to life. That's not the part of the story I'm looking to get into. I just want to point out this concept, this idea that we want to be together. We want to be a unit. We want to be together. And by being together, that accomplishes very, very powerful things. I tell my class, we were studying the end of the parish of Shemos. So Moses comes and asks Pharaoh, it's time to let my people go. And Pharaoh says, nothing doing. What's interesting is, not only does Pharaoh say nothing doing, Pharaoh says if the people are talking about going out to bring sacrifices, clearly they're not working hard enough. So Pharaoh says, no more straw. Same amount of bricks, no more straw. So I saw an interesting question. If Pharaoh wants them to work harder, why no straw? Just go ahead and say, instead of 20 bricks a day, 40 bricks a day. Instead of 25 bricks a day, 50 bricks a day. You can increase the workload without saying no more straw. Like, why was that the choice? Why was that the choice of increasing the labor by just saying no more straw? What was Pharaoh thinking? Let's assume he was thinking. So very interesting. We've talked about this also in the past, a little bit. It's been part of our theme. And that is that the purpose of the slavery for the Jewish people was to teach us an achdus, a togetherness. To be a nation, we have to be one, we have to be together. Pharaoh somehow knew this or understood this. So his intention, whenever he had the chance, was to say, no unity, no togetherness, you bicker, you fight, you argue, you have nothing to do with each other. Even when Moses, the first time Moses leaves Egypt, is because they tattletale. Doesn't have him tattletale Moses. Hey, we killed the Egyptian. So Moses has to run for his life. And Moses says over there, Rashi comments, he says, now I understand why we're suffering, because we tattletale. We get what we deserve. So the purpose of the Shibud, when Moses comes back, it has to be that they've learned their lesson, and we've learned to be one. We've learned to be together. There's a unity. There's an achdus. So Pharaoh wants like this. Just imagine for a second. If I tell you, instead of 10 bricks a day, you're making 20 bricks a day, or instead of 20 bricks a day, you're making 40 bricks a day. Okay, so however you make your bricks, you sit there, you have your oven, you make your bricks, and same thing every day. But straw, if the Pharaoh is no longer delivering straw, then now we have a totally different problem. Now, you got to run out to the fields for miles, just searching for straw that you can pull out of the ground. So imagine, me and you have been searching, and we both see straw, and we're running for it. And I push you out of the way, and you push me out of the way, and I say, I found it first, and you say, too bad, and you punch me, and I tackle you. Imagine what's going to happen if everybody's running around and fighting to pick up straw. So when all of a sudden there's not enough of something, and we all need it to fulfill our quotas, it leads to fighting. It leads to bickering. It leads to complaining and stealing and all the problems you can imagine. So Pharaoh's idea was really very, very good. They're going to fight over the straw, because how much straw is there already? You got to run to the fields. And yeah, there's enough straw if you walk far enough. But I found the straw closer. Why can't I take this straw? Why do you deserve it? I should get it. I was up earlier. I'm working harder. You found more. Right? Why can't you help me? There's so many ways. There's so many ways you can fight over straw. So the Jewish people, at this point, what I'm teaching my class, at the end of Shemos, the last 6 months before the plagues begin, they have to be able to run around and collect straw and not fight. And, oh, you saw it first? Please take it. Oh, here, you need some extra, take mine, right? I think there's some more over there. You know what? I think you saw this first. I'll just walk down the road. I'll find more, which is beautiful, which is what was necessary for the Jewish people to deserve to leave Egypt, because there's going to be this unity. So everything is coming full circle. We don't want to be counted as individuals. We don't want to be counted. You have to know a number. Okay, we'll give you coins. And what kind of coin do we give you? We give you a half coin, because the Alshach says, if we give a full coin, so I gave a coin, you gave a coin, we have nothing to do with each other. As soon as each of us give half a coin to create a whole, so we learn out that you need me, I need you, I'm not complete on my own. Until we unite, we're only part. Marriage, the same thing, by the way. Right, the same concept in a marriage, right? It's not husband, wife. It's husband and wife. It's together they create a new whole. Right? They were missing till now. Okay, well, my wife says I'm missing a lot of things, but that's okay, right? She has to complete me. So that's the concept. That's the goal. That's what we're looking for. What I'm learning out from this half a shekel, from this half that I give half and you give half, is that we're becoming one. That was the lesson in Egypt. That's the lesson of not counting. That's the lesson of unity. And that, for the most part, is what we learn from the Machzor Shekel. Now, continuing this thought, right, there's another interesting idea. When God told Moses that he's going to collect a half a shekel per, I'm going to say per person, but it's really men over 20, that they're the age of the army. Moses couldn't understand. Medrash says Moses couldn't understand. So God showed him a fiery coin. Okay, so what did Moses understand? And what did a fiery coin answer the question? Right? Like, there's a few places where God has to show Moses something. He couldn't understand the menorah. Great. Too hard to build. Moses didn't understand what the new moon looks like. Great. God shows him the new moon. You know what a half a shekel coin looks like. Right? You know. You can understand what a half a coin is. So if I can understand what a half a coin is, what is troubling Moses? So some Sefer says that Moses says the Jewish people are broken up into many communities. Then he was dealing with 12 tribes. And you can only imagine there were the tribes, and there were families within the tribes, and families in the families. So today, we have communities all over the place. In Europe, there are communities all over the place. Right? So how is it possible for so many small groups and communities? How is it possible to be one? That was troubling Moses. He wasn't troubled. He understands what it means to give a half a coin. That was not the problem. The problem was everything we've been saying till now, that everything is to get everyone together, to be one, to be a unit. Moses, how's a half a coin going to do that? Why is giving a half a coin going to create that we're all in it together, we're all one? So God shows Moses a fiery coin. So the Chassam Sofer says that's to show that the concept of being together is part of our nature. And you have to sort of develop that thought. But, fire is, you have all these sticks, and it's making a fire, and the fire is all one, right? So what looks like individuals becomes one conflagration, if I said that word right. That's one way of understanding. Avraham Lezhinsk says a little different. Moses has a little coin. A little coin? What can a little coin do? Something big. Okay, I understand something big will create unity. Something massive, something amazing. A little coin? Right? A nickel, a quarter, $50? What's that going to do? So God shows Moses a fiery coin. Fire is really very fascinating because fire does a lot of things. But fire burns, it's destructive, and fire gives warmth. Right? When we're cold, the weather's been crazy lately. Beginning of the week, I think it was I think one day this week was 73 degrees according to my car. Now driving here, we're in the mid-30s. Yesterday, this morning, it was freezing. Right? So you turn on the heat, right? Get in the car, flip on that heat till it's so hot you got to turn off the heat. Right? So fire burns and fire gives warmth. Coins are the same thing. You can learn from the half a coin. There could be good and there can be evil. And there's a lot of good that can come out of even a small coin. Right? So he says, he takes it a step further. He says the counting of people is not what leads to a plague. That's not it. There's beginning of the show, we talked about the perhaps evil eye. He's saying the counting is not the problem over here. The problem over here is there's divisiveness. When we don't take the two halves and create wholes, when we want to remain separate, we don't want to get together, we don't want to help each other, we don't want that fire to ignite all of us together, right? That is what leads to the plague. We bicker, we fight, we look at each other, we're jealous of each other. That's the problem that we have to live with. So now it happens to be nowadays, we no longer need the half coin for sacrifices. There's no real national tax anymore. But it happens to be that on Tainus Esther, the fast of Esther, the day before Purim, this year it'll be 2 days because I think you got Shabbos in the way. So we give half a coin, really you have 3 half coins. It's symbolic. And the idea is we don't have the sacrifices, but instead we have charity. Right? Instead, we're going to give our coins to charity, and that will create the blessing that we need. Still talking about counting. A lot of stuff to talk about counting. A lot of stuff. In any case, so one more thing to think about, and that is, why is God counting us? Because God tells Moses, there's a few places after the golden calf, later in this week's Torah portion, God is counting the Jewish people.
Get started. I'll tell you.
And that was the wrong music. In any case, God knows our number, right? God doesn't have to sit there and start to calculate and try to figure out how many Jewish people there are. So why is he counting? What is the purpose of this counting? So he says the purpose of this counting is... Oh, there goes the music. I tell you what, we're going to get into this question in the next show. But right now, the music... I hope you enjoyed it. Short and sweet. Thank you, of course, to all wonderful sponsor listeners. You know I can't do without you. Thank the wonderful production team. We have Alan in the back with us today. I hope I've left you some food for thought. Until next time, I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. Till next time, don't forget to think about it.
There's a house we can build, every room inside.
You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com, and of course, I will answer as many as I can. Or you can go to our webpage at letstalktorah.net. That's letstalktorah.net. You can find the archives, you can find the new shows, you can leave comments, you can leave your questions, and of course the all-important donate button. Please don't forget to hit that donate button. Whatever you can help us with is always greatly appreciated. We have 4 different levels. You pay for the studio, you help us grow, you help us steig, it's a great Jewish word, and in advance I do thank you. The weather, when I was preparing the show, I wrote down the weather is amazing. I even wrote down in my notes, who needs Florida? Because I was writing my notes like on Monday. I think it was Sunday or Monday. 60, 70. If I'd be writing my notes today, I would say, you know who needs Florida? I need Florida. It's freezing outside. Like, I don't know what happened. We actually have a break in school. We have like a long weekend off. So we're going to go to the East Coast, and then we decided 20 hours of driving to end up being there for 1 day. The kids don't have anybody their age, so we stayed. So the kids said, okay, you got to entertain us. So we have all kinds of plans. The problem is that one of those plans is a little bit of an outdoor type of place. So I'm not sure if it's going to work. It might be upwards of 50, then it'll work. I mean, I put a small deposit. So at worst, we'll just use it for another day. In any case, we spent a lot of time in the last show, talking all about, there we are, talking all about the half coin, the machzah shekel that the Jewish people donate on a yearly basis to be used for sacrifice, for public sacrifices. The first one was to be used for the sockets that were under the tabernacle, under the Mishkan. And I know we say its purpose was for, its use, maybe it's a better word, its use was for sacrifices, or it was used for the sockets. But it's really a way of counting the Jewish people. So I asked in the last show, but I couldn't get through the whole thing, why does God need to count us? Who needs to know a number? Let's say you're a king. So you're a king, you need to know how big your army is. Okay, I can handle that. Your general will have to know how many soldiers you have in the army. You want to know how many hospitals you have to build, the size of the roads, where people are going to live. I understand the idea of a census. We need to know where money needs to be spent, where money needs to be allocated. I get the idea of a census, right? You know, California and Texas and Florida have more people than Wyoming and Idaho and Michigan, by the way, right? So I understand the purpose of a census, but the verse says that God is counting us. Why does God need to count us? God knows how many people there are. And so what's he counting for? So counting is a very interesting idea if you think about it. I teach third graders, and I ask them, I say, like, do you count how many Lego people do you have? Do you count how many little Matchbox cars you have? They're very into collecting these cards, either history cards or rabbi cards or whatever's on these cards. You like to count it because this is something that you enjoy and you want to know how many you have. People count. We count things that are important to us. Most of us count money. Now, I'm not saying it's a good idea to count money. There's a blessing when things are not counted, but we count things that are important to us. So God is saying the Jewish people is so important to me. I'm counting them. Of course, God knows the number, but that doesn't show us that God loves us. The way God shows that he loves us is by counting us. So after, in this week's Torah portion, we have the golden calf, and 3,000 Jews will die. Counting us shows that God loves us. How many did I lose? How many had to be killed because of the golden calf? I didn't want to get too into the golden calf, but since I mentioned it, just a thought came to my head. It was only 3,000 people. There's millions of Jews. Millions. 3,000 is a pretty minuscule number at the end of the day. Right? Percentage-wise, you start figuring out. It's like I told the boys in school. I said, there's 550 children in this school. Right? So the percentage-wise is just a couple children compared to the whole school. Would you imagine that you want to be blamed? Would you like to be blamed for something that a child in another grade did and you're getting blamed? Like you say, hello, that has nothing to do with me. Like, why am I getting blamed for you? It's ridiculous. So, but we know, God tells Moses he's not wiping out the Jewish nation, but the punishment for the golden calf continues even today. Why am I getting punished? It was a couple of people. So the answer is that the Jewish people were responsible for each other. Everyone is responsible to make sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'm not saying walk around like policemen, but it's no different in your neighborhood, right? You walk around your neighborhood, if you see something going on, so you tell your neighbor, right? You see a child doing something dangerous, you don't want the child to get hurt. You're not trying to tattletale. You're just trying to protect the child. You see people in the neighborhood that don't belong there, so you speak to neighbors, you speak to people, you're responsible. The Jewish people were responsible for each other. if we're responsible for each other, so I don't get to say, mind your own business. It is my business. You doing something wrong affects all of us. Because, well, as we spent a lot of time in the last show talking about that we're together, there's unity, there's achdus, there's togetherness. We're all one. We're all in this boat together. Boat is a great example, because I always tell my class, I give a great story. I say, imagine we go on a trip and we're renting a boat and everybody has their room, and this boy brings his father's big drill with his 3-foot drill bit. And he starts drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat. And you say, hello, you're going to sink the boat. And the person with the drill says, mind your own business. This is my room. I get to do what I want in my room. You do what you want in your room. That's ridiculous, right? Now, as you drilling your hole is affecting all of us. So when somebody does something good or not so good, that affects all of us. So therefore, the Jewish people were misunderstanding that they could have easily, millions of people can stop a few thousand, they could have easily stopped those few from doing the golden calf. They didn't stop them. That means they misunderstood the whole idea of how we're supposed to take care of each other and the purpose of why we're supposed to take care of each other, and they let it slide, and that's not acceptable. All right, but we got way off topic, so we're backing up, right? So God counts each of us because we are so important, we are so valuable, we are so loved by God. It is interesting. There's a few verses in the Torah that talk about that the Jewish people is too large to be counted. We're not a very large nation, right? Whatever the numbers are today, 13 million, 15 million, 16 million, that's compared to, like, what are we up to now? 8 billion? 8 billion? Right? Every billion is 1,000 million, right? So there's 8,000 millions, right? And we're 15 million? I don't think we're 15 million. 13, maybe, but still such a small number. So what does it mean we can't be counted? That's ridiculous. So one of the answers are that it's a quality, not a quantity. But you need the lesson to know that you can't count. As we are a nation, we are so special that if you're that counting takes away, as we said, counting takes away from the unity, counting makes it into individuals, and we are not looking to count individuals. We're looking to recognize that there's a quality here that's not supposed to be counted. So I didn't have a chance in the last show. We did so much about counting. I have 2 amazing counting stories. One I for sure said before. It's a very famous story. One I may have said in the past. If you heard it, it's worth hearing again. So there was a man working in the diamond area. I don't think it's called the Diamond District in Russia. I don't know. The story's got to be 100 and change years old. And he's making his way to the office, and he's walking because they didn't have cars. Or certainly not that many cars in those days. And a guy comes running up to him and says, I need a favor. I have yard sites. It's the anniversary of one of my parents' death, and I must have a minyan. Please do me a favor, and please join our minyan. Are you sure? I'm in a rush. I got to get to the office. Yeah. I need you to come as quickly as you could. Okay. He goes in, looks around the room. There's 5 people sitting there. A minyan needs 10. And this guy had to run into the street to get him. Who knows how long it's going to take to get the next 4? So he turns around to leave, and he says, no, please, it's important. I just need you to stay. I need to say Kaddish. Please. Okay. Another guy gets in. A straggler comes in. 5 minutes later, another guy comes in. Finally, he gets to 10, and he figures that the guy who needed the minyan is going to say 1 Kaddish. Instead, the guy starts prayers from the beginning. Whoa. I'm going to be stuck here for 45 minutes. But what can I do? Maybe somebody will walk in. He's looking, he keeps looking at the door. We're all good at that, right? We all look at the door to see maybe someone will come in. No one ever comes in. And he's waiting and waiting, and finally the guy finishes. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Right? It's counting because it's a minyan. That's why I'm telling you the story, right? It's a quorum. So the guy walks out, starts walking down the street, and all of a sudden there's noise and yelling and screaming, and people are running. And somebody says to this diamond person, he says, "Run for your life. The communists have just taken over the whole business area, and they're killing people, and they're taking their merchandise. You got to run." So the guy was saved, right? Because he stayed to be the 10th man, or one of the 10, right? So he was part of a group, and that part of a group is power. That's one kind. That's one kind of counting. I actually have 3 stories here, but this one's a little out of order. So if I remember, I'm going to come back to it. So there's another story. And this is a people story. But again, what we've been discussing the last show and getting into this show, that the idea of God counting shows how beloved we are, how important we are, how special we are, the togetherness we need. The whole point of the counting is the point of the half coin is to show we're one, we're nothing without each other. So all that stuff, right, leads to this amazing story. So there was a girl, had a terrible limp. The story takes place in Israel. And this was one of those limps that must have come from a childhood virus or something. Exactly what it's from is not clear in the story. And she was going to a new high school. Now, most of the girls were nice to her. I can make fun. I mean, the person has a limp. But unfortunately, there were a couple girls that did start making fun. When she wasn't looking, they would walk behind her the same way she limped and drag their leg, and they would whisper and they would say things and they'd make fun, and it became an issue. It became a problem. And the girl complained to her teacher. And the teacher in turn would try to tell the girls, this is not appropriate behavior, you can't act this way. But, when I do it in elementary school, trying to teach them how to act, so I can stand on top of them. I can stand by them by recess and stand by them by lunch, and I can make programs that we learn to talk nicely and practice talking nicely, but we're little children. Little children, you can do that. Once you're into high school, you can give all the speeches you want. But if they're not interested in reacting, in accepting what they're doing, there's nothing you can do. So this teacher was massively frustrated. So she went to her husband and said, I have this problem in my class. I can't fix it. So her husband said, let's go to the rabbi. The rabbi was, his name was Rabbi Steinman. He's not alive anymore, recently passed away. And this teacher went ahead and went through the story and explained to him, and he's crying. He's crying. How could they do this to the girl? How could they be so mean? So he says to the teacher, tell the girls no more prayers. Very normal thing in school. In younger grades, we pray in class. Older grades will pray in the shul. But by girls, generally speaking, sometimes in high school daven together. Sometimes, depending on the size of the school, each class will daven as individuals, and then they'll get their day rolling. He says, you tell the girls no more prayers. Tell the girls they're murderers, and God doesn't want the prayer of a murderer. Okay, teacher is shocked, like, whoa. So, the teacher goes to class the next day, and, most classrooms, you have a daily schedule. You're used to what happens. My class, I've told you, I write down the whole schedule on the board, but it's the same exact schedule every day. Today there was no homework, so I take homework off the schedule, and they'll still ask me, no homework today? Because it's not on the board. Did you forget to put it there? Anyway, so all the girls take out their prayer books, their siddur, and the teacher says, please close your prayer books. We're not praying today. What? What do you mean not praying? We're not praying. As a matter of fact, we're not praying anymore. It's no longer part of our schedule. So the girls are like incredulous, like, well, what are you talking about? What do you mean we're not praying anymore? That's ridiculous. Of course we're praying. The teacher says, no, you're not. I went to Rabbi Steinman. Rabbi Steinman says, you're murderers. And murderers, God's not interested in your prayers. Your prayers are a total waste of time because of how you treat that girl in the class who has a disability, and therefore, no more prayer. And the girls don't know what to do. They're sitting there quietly, and the teacher's telling them, you're not praying. It's not happening. So open up your Chumash or whatever they study first, and we're going to start learning. And the girls are just like beside themselves. Like they love praying, and they want to pray, and the teacher's not letting them pray. Like, what are we supposed to do? Finally, a few of the more with it, intelligent girls wrote a letter of apology. And they went around the classroom and they made sure everybody signs that our behavior was unacceptable, and we actually recognize, right, this was like real shock treatment, we actually recognize how terrible our actions were, please forgive us, and it won't happen again. After the whole class signed, then they brought the paper to the teacher. The teacher did not ask for this letter because Rabbi Steinman didn't really tell her what would fix them. It was understood that this is shock treatment. They have to really come to understand that what they did is so horrific that God doesn't want them talking to them anymore. If God doesn't want you to talk, I mean, if you were told that the whole beauty of prayer is that God wants to talk to me 3 times a day, now you tell me God doesn't want to talk to me? Like, so what? What's everything worth? So the teacher accepted it, and they prayed like never before. And I have to assume the story had a happy ending because that is the end of the story. But again, that's a people thing, right? In other words, are we one? Are we together? Or is there divisiveness? There's separation. We're not all in it together. We don't take care of ourselves. If we're in it together, then as a unit, we are powerful. God wants our prayers. God wants to talk to us. If we do things to split ourselves up, then you see from the story, God's not interested. So there's really a lot of lessons we had today. In the last show, and this show, talking about the half a shekel, but there's so much to talk about in this week's Torah portion. We're going to try our best to move on. Happens to be that it's almost a follow of ladies. The next thing in the Torah portion is the kiyar. The kiyar was like the wash basin. It was this big urn almost of water made of copper, actually copper mirrors. And before the priest, the Kohen, was allowed to do any work in the temple, he had to wash his hands and feet. It wasn't a cleanliness thing, it was a holiness thing. Happens to be the idea of washing our hands before prayer, we actually learn from the kiyar. Just like the Kohen is going to wash his hands before he starts the sacrifices, our prayer is in place for our sacrifices. We wash our hands before prayer. Many people will wash their hands before they make a blessing. Some people will wash their hands before they start Torah study. It's a purification, right? It's not hygienic, right? You take the physical, make it spiritual, right? And by the way, this is not purification either, right? I go to the mikveh waters to purify myself. The idea of washing my hands is sanctification, right? Which implies a spiritual elevation. So now it makes sense why we use these special mirrors. Why? What happens like this? The women donated, or many women donated, their copper mirrors. We, of course, our mirrors are a piece of glass where you paint silver on the back of the piece of glass. So they didn't have that. So you're not going to walk around with a piece of silver as a mirror, because silver was money. And why do you have why using a coin for a mirror, right? Silver is money. It has nothing to do with value, right? Silver is money. Copper, gold is expensive. So copper, I guess if you shine it bright enough, you can make yourself a very beautiful mirror. So they donate their mirrors. Moses wanted nothing to do with these mirrors. He said, mirrors for ladies to make themselves pretty, to entice people. Why would I want something like that in the tabernacle where we're being spiritual? God, of course, says to Moses, Moses, I love those mirrors. I want you to use them for the kiyar. So why did God love them? So the answer is that in Egypt, the Pharaoh made us into slaves. What was his reason for making us into slaves? Because it says, he was worried about either Moses being born or the population explosion. He figured he's going to make us all into slaves, and we'll be so busy working all day long, we won't have time for our wives, won't be worth being married, and the population will slow, hopefully, to a stop. That was his plan. The women said nothing doing. So the women made themselves very pretty, very enticing, went out to their husbands, and they convinced their husbands to stay with them. So God says it's because of these women that the Jewish people survived in Egypt. So yes, it's true that a mirror could be used totally physical, but these mirrors, yes, they were used for physical, yes, but they were used for spiritual. They were used, the intention, the purpose, the point was to use them to keep the Jewish people going. So God says you took these mirrors, which were physical, and you turned them into spiritual, right? Now that's what the washing is for. The washing is to lift up the person spiritually. And that's what these women did with the mirrors. They lifted up themselves and their husbands spiritually. And there goes the music. I hope you enjoyed it, short and sweet. Thank you, Wurzel, our wonderful sponsor. Listen, I can't do without you. Thank you to our production team. We have Alan in the back with us today. I hope I've left you some food for thought. Until next time, I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. And until next time, don't forget to think about it.
Is all it's gonna take. A million dreams for the world we're gonna make. There's a house.
Until next time, I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. And until next time, don't forget to think about it.
Is all it's gonna take. A million dreams for the world we're gonna make. There's a house we can build